Where's the love? Where's the love? It's right here in the heart of the city. I'm Silas Grant. I got my man with me.
Yo.
TL, what's up?
Hey, what's up, man?
I'm
good. All right, you all right?
I'm doing well, man.
All right, man. Feeling real good, man.
Yeah, man. I see you had an anniversary, man. Happy
Yeah,
anniversary.
bro. 9 years, man.
Yeah.
Hey, listen. Check this out, though. You remember, bro, like we first started this. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We first started this. I met Jessica when we were doing this the first time
around. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You already know where I was at and where I was at.
Yeah.
Even just so for real, like my outlook on marriage. You know what I'm saying? And so salute to you. You know what I'm saying? Just for setting the stand. Salute to KJ. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Salute
yeah.
to Duck. I mean, Duck wound up getting married too in that period. You feel what I'm saying? Mike
Yeah.
Wilson.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And before I go on too, shout out to Mike Wilson.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We love you, homie. You know
Yes,
what I mean?
indeed.
But the guys, like y'all around me, you know what I'm saying, kind of made marriage, something I could touch and feel and see. You know what I'm saying? Even before I got there. But yeah, I'm proud that we 9 years, man, going on forever. You know what I mean? So
I
appreciate that.
Every time your anniversary comes up, I didn't see it this time, but normally the memories videos come up in my phone from Facebook when I was at your in-laws' house for the reception for the family and friends.
Yeah.
When you were doing the dance for her uncle, man.
Yeah,
God
man.
bless his soul,
Yeah, man. Shout out to Uncle Valnay, man. Rest in peace, man.
That was a funny video.
Dog, man. Yeah, I miss bro, man. I'm just I'm grateful too to have the time that we had with him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Though I'm certainly super close to my in-laws, Jessica's family, you know what I'm saying? Her mom, her dad, obviously, you know what I'm saying? Her brothers, her cousins, but you know what I mean? Unc was her aunt, you know what I mean? But Unc was a special dude.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That was my man.
Yeah.
For real, bro.
I didn't, I was around him a few times, but I could tell there was something
His
about
spirit,
him.
yeah, no doubt about it, man. No
Yeah,
doubt, man. I know he's smiling down on us for sure.
One other thing I wanted to bring up real quick. This show has been about really bringing out the excellence in people and giving people a chance to observe a conversation where we talk about excellence, right? And in the pursuit of that. And I want to shout out the museum, man. I saw the promo today for DC United, man.
Bruh.
That's incredible.
No,
man.
listen. Man, shout out to the museum, bruh.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
it's man, I think I saw that. I mean, you think about, NFL, the Commanders partnership first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the situation with with DC United, and then like the what touched me the most today in the post that I saw around that was sort of on Saturday, right, when the capsule was released, it's on Fanatics, right?
Yeah.
That's different. Not come to the store, not come to the museum and grab it. You know what I mean? Like either go to the store at Audi Field, or you can go on Fanatics. Like it's that level. It's that level. We talking about a brand, obviously, started by GMO, but like that once upon a time people just saw as a an extension of, sort of streetwear in DC as we had known it, which that would have been impeccable in itself. Right? Carrying on a legacy of Madness and We Are One and DDTP and All Days and so on and so forth. Right? That would have been enough. Just the new Eat and then now museum, you know what I'm saying? That continuum. But like when we talk about taking it to the next level, man,
that's it.
That's what we watching, man. That's excellence for real, bro.
And to what I always think about is for other people that are in that space attempting to do that same sort of work, that's what you got to look at. And in order to get the same outcome, you got to do the same input. And they put the work in for a long, long time, and they represent at a high level.
Man, they represent us.
Yeah.
And I mean, just shout out to them and the whole team. Everybody that's involved. I mean, we know the GMO are the forward-facing pieces of that, but just everybody, the whole team. And, both of them, too, just bringing a wealth of other experiences in relationships and know-how and melding all of that together, man. They certainly master class, and we also, I think, in that same vein, to speak to, what happened last week with their another collab with Under Armour.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so it's like they keep doing, but we, you know what I mean?
I forgot about that already.
Right.
It's just how fast they moving. Yeah,
Unbelievable, man. New joints, one based on their original, one of the shoes, the pattern of the original sort of logo, that chair that used to be in the store,
Yep.
and then the other one based on the subway. I mean, just creatively, just continuing to just take stuff to the next level, man. Everything possible, bro.
That's it. So today we are fortunate to have someone that we know very well.
Indeed.
Someone that has really made a mark in DC over the last decade, if not more. And we want to have a conversation today about a number of things with her. And I think it could go the full range, right?
Yeah.
But we do want to welcome to Heart of the City, Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard.
Hi.
Welcome.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank
I feel
you for being
special.
here.
Yeah.
No, for sure. We glad you.
I've watched so many other people here. I'm
Yeah,
finally getting
yeah.
my turn. I was
Yes, right.
excited when I got your message.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you being here. Both of us have gotten a chance to know you for a very long time. And I think you represent in a unique way what the modern Washingtonian is. And we wanted to have a conversation with you about a number of things.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, I couldn't do it any justice to try to introduce you and give your whole bio. So if you could give
my
us a little
bio.
background.
Let's see. So I'm Faith Gibson Hubbard. I always say that I am the daughter of a young mother who had me and named me Faith because everyone told us that we weren't going to make it. And so she wanted to be able to call out my name every time and know that it was possible. And I hated my name for a long time because I wanted a cool name, something else, not like Old Faithful or anything like that. But as I have gotten older, I have seen how my name has really guided my path. And I am a Christian, I'm a believer, and I know how God is working and moving in my life. But I grew up as an Army brat. And so living here in the District of Columbia, in my neighborhood, in the house that I live in, means a lot to me because I never had this chance to put down those same roots as a child. And that's probably why we are here talking today, because those roots are roots that other people actually watered before I even came into that community. And so it's really important to me. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. My mom decided to join the Army. She met the person who would become my father because I have not known my biological father well. So Gibson is a name that I carry very proudly because my father adopted me when I was 8 years old when my parents married. And so when my husband Drew and I got married, I told him I will definitely take on your last name, but Gibson will always stay.
Shout out to Drew.
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
he's a great one. That's why I'm able to be here because he's at home right now with our kids, and always a really great partner. But went to high school, college in Georgia, and decided to figure out what I wanted my next career path to be. I thought I was going to be Whitley Gilbert from a different world, but yet I was not an art buyer. I became an educator.
Is that what Willie became? She became an art buyer?
She did. She was,
Yeah,
she was an art buyer.
I missed that. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't.
And she was in the artist world,
Yeah. Okay.
museum world. But became an educator. I actually started out first in the community affairs space, and I was doing Project Safe Place in Jacksonville, Florida. So working with disconnected youth and with families in crisis. And if a family's in crisis, you can even see the sign outside now of fire departments or even outside of police departments where there'll be the diamond with like an adult with arms around a child.
Yes.
Project Safe Place. So I was doing that work, but I started coaching a step team at a middle school. And my principal at the time, Ironetta Wright, was like, you would be great in the classroom. And that's what took me into education and has guided my path ever since. And then I ended up here, came here for one weekend to hang out with a sorority sister and met Drew.
Yes.
Wow.
And here we are building our family.
Yeah, that's
That's
all right.
it. Yeah.
This place would do that though. You know what I mean? Like,
I was just trying to hang out at Toscana
Yeah.
West. And
Is that what you met you at
that's
Toscana
where it
West?
was.
Oh,
He
my
walked
God.
in. He had on
I
a tuxedo.
Street.
I said, "Oh, who was that?"
Yeah.
And one of my girlfriends was like, "Oh, that's just Drew." I said, "Oh, well,
Oh, she knew him. Okay.
Who is
Yeah,
that?"
yeah.
Yeah, she had gone to Spelman. He went to Morehouse, and she was like, "Are you interested?" I said, "I think so." And she ended up connecting us.
That's all right.
Yeah, look at that. Toscana West. I've been in there a
Toscana
couple
West.
times. Yeah, I used to swing through there.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing too.
Yeah, Drew know where to go at.
He knew where to go.
Let me ask you a question about, you mentioned being an Army brat.
Yep.
Right. How many, I know you see you went to high school in Georgia. How many places did you live altogether? Like in how long was your mom in the military?
So my mom joined the Army when I was 5, and I know how much you love your grandmother because you gave her some heavenly shout outs recently, and I have a deep, very strong relationship with my grandmother who helped raise me. So she joined when I was 5, but my grandmother was very clear. I was not going anywhere until my mother had everything laid out and ready for me to go.
Right.
So my mom first was stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. And that's why it wasn't until I was 8 when I was able to go, because my grandmother had to be reassured that her baby was going to be going to the right place.
Right.
So we were in El Paso, Texas, and then where did we go? Hinesville, Georgia, which was Fort Stewart, which is outside of Savannah, and then Fort Lewis and Tacoma, Washington, then Fort Gordon and Augusta, Georgia. But my parents are both in healthcare, so that kept us at very large medical centers. My father and my mother are both first-generation college students, so they were trying to teach us college graduates, and also had gone on to professional degrees, which were things that they had not seen. So the military also helped my parents be able to build just a different type of structure and family life that they had never experienced. So we didn't live a whole lot of places, but enough where you learn how to.
I've only lived once, so you just named.
But when you talk about people who are a career Army, like my father ended up being, they could sometimes live all different places. But my father also made choices that probably didn't advance his career because he wanted to keep our family together as a unit.
Yeah, I asked that question for a reason though, right? And knowing you and being in spaces with you and seeing your ability to connect with people. And I asked that question is, do you see those experiences as helping you be able to do that and be comfortable, really quickly?
You gotta make friends fast.
Yeah.
Well, 10,000%. I know that helped me, because when I was in elementary school, I moved around a lot, from Cleveland, Ohio, to Texas, to Georgia, to Washington State. That was all Tacoma, Washington, all in elementary school years. And so when you're moving from place to place to place, other people are moving too, but you need to find your tribe of people. You need to find where you fit in. And the other thing that the military does for you is that other people become your family, right? Because your family's not there with you. My dad's mother, my grandmother, God rest her soul, she was very fiery. She had 14 kids from the time she was 14 until she was 50. That was her last pregnancy. Can't imagine that. Happy to have just my 2 and done. But she had never even gotten on a plane. So she wasn't coming to visit us in the places where we were. So you have to build family and community where you are. And so I know that my ability to do that, and also my deep desire to want to do that in places where I reside in. The district is my forever home, so I'm not moving from here. This is where I will be. But I think it's really important to see the humanity in people and the ways in which you can connect with them. And I am certain that growing up that way helped me be able to do that probably more quickly than other folks.
Yeah, because, everybody don't have, that's something, sometimes I think for any of us, right, if it's something that we do, I guess naturally, we don't always see it as just how much of either a skill or a tool it is, right? Because other people can see it, like, damn, I picked that up, from you, your ability to do that. Another question that I thought about when you mentioned, right? So, boom, the lady, you teaching the STEP team, the lady is like, yo, I think you'd be great in the classroom. And whatever the situation was, you opted to take her up on that. What did you teach, and how was that? What did you learn from that experience?
So I taught English language arts, 7th and 8th grade, at Lakeshore Middle School in Jacksonville, Florida, on the west side of town. And all of my students were bused from the north side of town. And to know anything about Jacksonville, to know it is probably one of the largest cities, landmass-wise, in the United States. I think probably Houston and Anchorage, Alaska are the others. And clearly, Houston has far more people. But on the north side of town, it's probably kind of, if we think about areas that don't have as much opportunity, workforce-wise. Also, it's a huge, as I mentioned, landmass, so their public transportation is not that great. Right. So students being bused from the north side of town to the west side, which could take you, going in that direction, 45 minutes with no traffic. Their parents and being able to come to our school community was almost non-existent. Right. So my time at Lakeshore Middle School with Ironetta Wright, who is now the superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools, but she's native to Jacksonville. She had grown up in that community. She taught me a lot about you can't just let what you see right in front of you be the answers to all your questions. And she really gave me permission to think outside of the box around how I was teaching my students, about grammar, about poetry. She was like, if they don't understand this poetry, what kind of poetry do you think they would understand? I was like, well, I'm pretty sure they understand rap music. She was like, yep, that's poetry. And she allowed me to just really think outside the box, and also to see myself in my students and their parents in ways that, you know, I don't think if I had her guidance at the time that I would have been able to do that, because I was young. I was in my early 20s, and my education experience had been different. And the community that the school was in, everyone was retired. So they were older, whiter, and there were all these black students being bused into their community. So that was a very interesting dynamic. And I lived on the complete opposite side of town, on the south side. With my aunt, we lived close to the Jacksonville beaches. So a lot of my kids that I taught, and they also taught me, let's be clear, they taught me a lot, had never even been to the beach. Right. Or experienced other things that were beautiful in our city that belonged to them. So it taught me a lot about even how I do the work that I do now, in seeing the humanity in people and seeing myself in the people, not just that I am serving, but also what are they offering to me in that experience as well.
When I think about all that you just laid out in terms of your upbringing and you beginning the path that you're now on, that mission, the one thing that comes back to mind, and maybe you may not remember this, but I think you made a Facebook post many years ago about your name. Mm-hmm. And I guess at the time, people were calling you Faith Hubbard.
Oh, I hated it.
And you were like, it's Faith Gibson Hubbard. Mm-hmm. And I was a young man, right, in my late 20s. And at the time, I didn't really understand the value in someone making that the emphasis, right? Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, when I read your post, it like convicted me. Mm-hmm. And ever since that point, that was a turning point for me in terms of respecting somebody's lineage to that degree. Mm-hmm. And I think what you've talked about over the last several minutes has really been about identity. So I want you to talk about the importance of identity and people respecting the fullness of who you are.
Yeah, I think identity is so important. So I was born as Faith Alicia McQueen, because, as I mentioned, my mom, I was young, when she had me. And I guess let me say, as Black people, we have challenges with identity anyways, because we don't have the same type of direct connection to our history that other people might, other ethnicities might, right? Because of so many things, but definitely slavery, and also how our families have been spread across this nation in lots of different ways. But as a woman, I think, as a Black woman, your identity becomes so important because it is so easy to get lost in someone else's identity or their purpose if you're not strong on who you are or who you also want to be. So, who I might have been as Faith Gibson before I met Drew, and he has helped me also be able to clarify even more of that particular identity, and has been so supportive of that, is really important to me because I always want to remember who I am and whose I am and where I've come from and really value that. So my father had no sons, just my sister and I, which he said we were very high maintenance and had a lot of requirements, which is probably why both of our husbands understand that we have a lot of requirements. But it was, he didn't have to adopt me. He didn't have to make me his daughter. That was a choice. And one that has changed my life and that I want my children to know about and that I want other people to know about. I also think about the struggles and the things that I had to overcome as Faith Gibson so that I could be prepared to be in a partnership with Drew Hubbard. And so all those things really mean just a lot to me. I mean, my mom's family, my mom's side of the family is from Louisville, Mississippi. And my great-grandmother, Annie Mae Johnson, she had a lot of sacrifices that she made in finding her own identity, which gives me a lot of strength today, and as well as my father's mother, Bulette Gibson. And I want to be able to carry all of that with me and show my children that identity too. So when people try to cut my name short, I'm like, oh, no, there may not be a hyphenation, but that is my name. Yeah. And there's a lot to be said in a name.
Yeah, Izzy and Sophie, yeah. Like them know. That Lewis Jones got to stay there. Yeah.
You know, it's a whole lot easier not to change your name. I can tell you that.
Man, they got to stay there. No,
well, I had to tell Drew, I was like, listen, if I go into the Social Security office and there's a long line, I'm coming back as Faith Gibson. He was like, let me say all the prayers I can say. And I walked in there right off of Brentwood Road. There was nobody in there, not a soul. So clearly, his prayers were, so it worked out. But I told him there won't be a hyphenation, but I will always go by the entire thing because it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
No, that's dope. So you get here to Scana West, meet Drew, you decide how it was. You wasn't until you gonna be here.
Well, he was clear we were gonna be here.
Right.
Yeah, he was already. Drew had already. He came here to go to law school and started working at the DNC and then ended up at the council. And he loved everything about DC. Yeah. So he was like, listen, this is going to be our home.
If you with me, we going to be
and
here.
I had never been used to, as I said, I moved around a lot, not only as a child, but also as an adult. Like I lived in Atlanta, then I was in Jacksonville. So moving for me was like not a thing. So the fact that he said, we are going to put down roots here, I was like, oh, okay, what does that look like? I didn't know. But Drew's parents were married for 57 years before his dad passed away. And they lived in the exact same house for 55 of those 57 years. So he understood what that meant for him as a child and having that connection to a place that he could truly call home in a way that was just different for me. So he was clear.
Yeah,
we were gonna be here.
So when you figuring out though what you gonna do here, what was that like? Was that daunting for you, or was it like then you had your choice, and then what made you decide on that next step?
Yeah, so I taught, and then I worked in the nonprofit sector, and then the economy was bad. And so in that time of the economy being bad, that downturn, I decided to go back and work on my master's. And so I was actually just, like I said, visiting for that weekend when I was here. But once I met Drew, I had already been accepted into a PhD program at Virginia Tech. And I was on the fence as to whether or not I was going to go to Blacksburg or do it in Northern Virginia because there's a campus just right across the water over there. And I decided that I would do the program there. And I was working part-time, but being involved in the community is something that my parents always made sure that I did growing up. And so I looked for ways that I can get involved. I made the mistake of joining the community listserv, Google group.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There was a lot
going on.
I had to put that thing on mute, digest, unsubscribe, resubscribe, just read it on the website. But what kind of helped me think about my next step in DC and really making this my home was well, let me try to go to my ANC meeting. Where's the Civic Association? I have a lot of neighbors who live on my block who have been there for decades. And so I got to know Miss Atkins. I got to know Miss Francis. I got to know Miss Love. And so they made it very clear that number one, because Drew and I were living together before we got married. So Miss Atkins came over. It was like, if you want this pie, I need to know that you all are gonna marry.
Yeah.
Okay, because
Exactly.
what's happening here?
Yeah. What they said, with the old people, you shagging up. That's what the old people.
She was like,
Yeah.
are you just giving away all the milk? Okay. And Miss Atkins, I was like, so no pie? Okay. But she also made sure, and many of our neighbors made sure that I knew all the different stuff that was going on. So we started going to the Civic Association meeting. I was like really curious about what was this thing, ANCs. I had never heard about that, other places I lived, and so I wanted to be involved in that. But there was one message that came across that said Ward 5 doesn't have any middle schools. And I was intrigued by that because I had taught middle school. And I know that that is the point where a child makes a decision if their education is worth it. If you think back to your own education, and I know even if I think back to mine, 7th grade was a confusing time.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want to do. My father is a physician. My mom's a nurse. I didn't want to do any of those things. I didn't know if I thought I was smart, but I didn't really know. I wasn't dealing with a lot of the other challenges that I would see my students later on deal with. But it is a really confusing time, and you need the type of school and people around you that are going to show you the love that you deserve. So when I saw that notice, it really bothered me. And I said, well, let me go to this meeting. And see what it's about. And it was a meeting for the Ward 5 Council on Education. And I walked into the room, and there were some people there that I will keep nameless. And I was like, these people don't have kids. And if they do, their kids are grown. You know, they're getting ready to make some decisions for the children I'm going to have and at some point. And you know, I want to be a part of this to make sure that we have more voices than just the more seasoned residents that are here in this room. They had clearly kept the organization going, but they weren't going to be invested. I mean, they would be invested, but they wouldn't have literally like a child to invest in what we were going to create. And so I got involved with the Ward 5 Council on Education. And that has literally, that one choice point is actually what led me to everything else that I did. And when I walked into the room, again, I was the youngest person probably in there. They didn't have a lot of other folks coming to the meetings unless it was a particular issue. We're going to close schools, people would show up. You know, there was an incident of violence, people would show up. But they weren't showing up regularly enough to be a part of the ongoing conversations.
And date this for us. Like, what year is what we talking about?
Oh, this is maybe... I was living in the city before this, but we bought our house in Ward 5 in 2010.
Okay.
So it was probably about 2010. And they had already been working on this advocacy to DCPS, and Kaya Henderson was the chancellor at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I joined the advocacy. I was like, somebody's going to need to pick up the mantle. You know, I have time because I was in my PhD program full time and I was working for the university. So I had a lot more flexibility. And got involved, and that is actually how I realized even more who are the people that I want to learn from in my community, because folks have been here, you know, and what are these individual schools that we're talking about right now? So Brookland Elementary was closed, but at that time I met several people who were like, oh, I went to Brookland, I went to Taft, I went to Bacchus, and I went to Shade. You know, like people were talking about all these different places that were foreign to me because now these are closed buildings, shuttered, not being utilized for things. And I wanted to make sure that the same way that people felt so proud to go there was something that would be integrated into that process.
That's first of all, like you mentioned, like my kids, their school was Shade, right? And I think about as you just saying, and I think about what it more so on the elementary side, but the elementary schools in my neighborhood that are now charter schools, but that most people moving into a community, particularly like a DC community, they may move into a neighborhood and that school is closed today, and they would probably, even if they meet somebody that went to that school, they would never connect with that person enough to even know that. You know, so, and all they think about is, oh, well, what it can be. but you have no understanding of what it was to people. And you know, that to me, that's just like one of them things that I appreciate your curiosity in that way. You know, your openness to hearing from those people. You know, to just say, yeah, I went, and you saying it was a matter of, you know, for people who be watching this that may not have the context, the schools that you named, Bacchus, Taft, you name one more.
Brookland.
And also Spingarn was really a conversation too.
We were talking about the fact there was no middle school.
Oh, right.
You know what I'm saying?
was still open, but it was on the
that was a high
chopping
school
block
though,
to
right?
be. Yeah. It was another real conversation.
Charles Young was the middle school.
Yeah.
That's it. Right.
You know what I mean? But just to think about that in that period, and you was coming out of the sort of the Michelle Rhee era, and a lot of schools that got closed and blah, blah, blah. But just hearing that, it's like, wow, like, I think that's sort of a microcosm of a lot that happens here. Where people come, they move here, even they get active. But it's only about, okay, how can I make my imprint? Or how can I, you know, change stuff or bring my new ideas without having sort of that, like, reverence for what was there prior.
But I was just really blessed to encounter people who could help me better understand the community that I was living in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to. From the time Miss Atkins was coming over with the pie telling me I better get married. And she grew up in D.C. herself, or Miss Francis, who lives in my neighborhood. And now, you know, she is probably she's starting to transition to a different phase of life, clearly. She was sharing with me a time where she was the first Black person, first Black family, one of the first Black families to live in the neighborhood, and people were burning crosses in people's yards in our neighborhood. So I've been really fortunate to encounter people who I could learn from. And I think you have to want to. And I really wanted to, because I realized that this was going to be my home, and I don't want to just know what it is today.
Yeah.
But also there have been people who have created a foundation where I can build my family. And I wanted to better understand that, because my children are Native Washingtonians, and I want them to be proud of not only the DC they know today, but also of the legacy that came before them. And you can only do that when you're willing to connect with other people. But you can't be afraid of the community that you're within, and afraid that, you know, you're not going to be able to leave your imprint in some way. And I think sometimes people are so busy thinking about the imprint that they are going to leave, or maybe not thinking about anything at all, just living day to day. But I don't know. I just wanted to be really curious. And being in that space, you meet a lot of people who help you be curious. And so as people would call out different school names, for example, I live very close to Woodridge Elementary, and a lot of my neighbors were telling me when they were growing up, that's where they went to elementary school. But now it's Friendship Public Charter School, and most of the kids who attend that school don't live in our community, but it has a really rich history. So I was like, that's interesting. I want to learn more about what's going on there. But I think you do need to have a certain level of curiosity in the community in which you're living and building your life.
Yeah, I think about that school piece is deep as far as the tale of communities as well, right? Like I was mentioning around my way, you had John F. Cook, that's now Monteverde.
Yep.
You had Scott Montgomery, that's now Kip. Now, you mentioned Friendship, but it made me think about this. Friendship now is at the old Armstrong. And then Walker Jones is down by where Surson Quarters was. Yeah. But all of those were community schools outside of Armstrong was a trade school, so we scratching that. But Cook, Scott Montgomery, and Walker Jones, they all are within 5 blocks of each other. But it was that many children and families in that community once upon a time. And so in education being your expertise, and we also talking about, you know, people, you representing a group or an era when people move into DC, right? How was it, like, from your perspective, navigating interacting with sort of both worlds, the people that were tied to those old schools and the different ways of the past, or what DC had been, and also being in circles of people that were talking about innovation and how to move the needle in DC. How do you like navigate those worlds?
Well, I was really living, just like you said, at that intersection, because Drew and I were thinking about starting our own family, and my kids were going to need to go to school somewhere. And so we clearly weren't going to be going back to what we had before, but how can we at least preserve the history of that, and also in some ways kind of pay tribute to in what's new that's being created, was really important to me. How did I don't know. I feel like it was almost divine intervention that certain people I crossed paths with. I met Silas. I think I met you pretty soon after we moved into the community, and I don't even necessarily remember how.
So I knew Drew through Ed Fisher.
Okay.
And when Drew ran for Ward 5.
Oh, yes.
That's when I really
I
officially
forgot
met you.
about that. I forgot.
Yeah.
That actually helped me meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
Maybe I tried to block that out.
That's Red Air too.
Yeah, because you ran, he ran. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Ooh, yeah, that was I didn't know if I liked Kenyon, but see, now we're friends.
Right.
But then, so Drew and I lived in our house. He proposed to me, and he was working at the council, and we were planning our wedding, and he came home one day. Our council member at the time had gotten caught up in a few things and was not going to be able to serve anymore in this capacity. He was going to be serving, doing something different. And so there was going to be an opening. And Kenyon had run before. But since Drew had been at the council, working at the council, he had always had this passion to run. So he came home and he was like, hey, I think I want to run for the council. I was like, hey, we're about to get married. What do you mean?
Right.
And I said, oh, I remember being like, I need a moment. And I called my best friend and I was like, this Negro just told me he wants to run for the council. We have stuff to do. Like we about to get married. I don't have time to be at campaign events and, doing all this different stuff. And I was like, what in the world? I was like, who wants to do this when you are at this place in life? But the one thing, and I know you just celebrated your anniversary. Drew and I just celebrated 12 years of marriage. And you have to be willing to, everybody can't, I guess let me say it this way. There are going to be different times when someone's going to need to step forward and shine in your relationship, and you have to support their ability to shine. And I realized that was something that I needed to do at that point, and this was a dream that he had. And, I'm going to be his wife, and I need to support that. And I just asked him, I said, well, okay, you're going to have to leave work, and we just bought this house. So what is the financial plan for what we're about to do? And he wrote out the financial plan and he held true to it. And him running for the council actually is that is actually how I met a whole lot of people, because we were out constantly. Kenyon was clearly the favorite. But I was also determined that in that process that some people were going to make me their favorite. That I was going to get to know people, and that if they couldn't get to know my husband, who can sometimes be more introverted, I was like, at least I can try to help him in that way. I can be kind of the yin to the yang. And so we were always out at these candidate forums, neighborhood cleanups, knocking on doors. And we just met a lot of people. That's when I met Delano. Kenyon, I'm trying to think about who. There were so many people in the race. There were a lot of people in that race. But we were always together. And this is really, social media was around, but it wasn't like how it is now. So you weren't relying on a lot of that. You literally had to do the face-to-face. And so I was in Bloomingdale. I was down in Hanover. I'm in Bates. I mean, you have to go to all these different places. And there are probably a lot of people that I would have never met if it wasn't for that time.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about you and Drew in particular is that Drew's the kind of person, if there's a problem, like let's say there's a fire over here, right? He's going to say, don't look over there, but there's a fire over there. We're going to get it done. When Faith sees the fire, it's like, everybody stop. The fire's right there. We're going to attack this right now, right? So both of you being in leadership in your respective careers, you guys have two different approaches, but it works. Like, talk a bit about how that synergy has been created and sustained.
Drew is always calm,
Yeah.
always stable. Like, he is he is the rock and the stability. But the thing that I love most about my husband is that he is not afraid to just let me be who I am, and also to know and to feel secure in that all the time. And I think about that when I was running for the council, and because of his role in city government, he couldn't be with me a lot. And he had so many other people that he entrusted. I can think about probably even both of you, other people who he knew would be around to support me, but he also knew that I'd be okay being, who I am. So even when I am the person who's like, there's a crisis, and he's like, just calm down. It'll be all right. I'm like, it's actually not going to be okay. We have to pay attention to this right now. He provides me the safe space to be able to step back and say, okay, there's a crisis, but Faith, think about how you really want to address that. And I think everybody needs that person in their life. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's, somebody else, but he can also help me he reminds me too of who I am sometimes when I'm like, should I show people that side of myself? And he's like, no, you got to be, who you are. So he's a very, I always call it, it's calm, but sometimes it's so calm that it's restful. Yeah. And it can be, a marital frustration. But he is who he is. And just honestly, I mean, he's the perfect balance to my personality.
So for the audience, real quick, your husband ran for Ward 5 Council in 2012. 10 years later, you ran.
I did.
Just for the audience's knowledge.
So he actually, during that race in 2012 was when we got married.
Right.
We missed the straw poll in Ward 5. We found out about it right after we came out from saying I do.
Wow.
Because we got married on Hampton's campus. So we were in the chapel, and people were like, you did not win the straw poll. Kenya McDuffie did. And we actually came back. We got married on a Saturday. We were back in the district on Sunday so that we could knock doors that evening.
Yeah. And you moved from being the support person of someone running to you being a candidate. What did you learn from those two different positions?
What I learned in the support role is that everybody needs that support person. You need someone who's going to be committed to you, regardless of what the other noise is in the space. And I think that's a value in any area of life, whether you're running for public office or not. There are always going to be people who are your tribe of people, and they believe in you, and you have to connect to that. And you also have to value and appreciate those people. And so I learned a lot about that because we did not have quite the infrastructure that other campaigns did at that time. But I believed in my husband, and I was willing to do whatever I could in order to help other people see elements of him that maybe he couldn't even express himself. But I would have never thought that I would have run for the council. That was not, running for public office was not anything that was of interest to me. I think for some people, that's what they have always wanted to experience. To me, I'm more interested in what are really the needs that need to be filled within our community, and do I have anything to offer to help fill that need?
Yeah, and the roles there. So that's a decade window between 2012.
We celebrated our 10-year anniversary when I was running.
And he got married when he was running, and it celebrated 10-year anniversary when you were running. In between that time, in the various roles that you had and the things that you've done, what's been your favorite? Now, clearly, wife, mother, daughter, sister, friend, we get that, but professionally, what's been your the role that you enjoyed the most? So I've started 2 government offices, the Office of the Student Advocate, which is in the State Board of Education, and I established that office in 2015. Talk heavy.
Yeah.
My bad, I'm sorry.
That role was important to me because, you know, I talked about the middle school fight that we had in Ward 5, and we now have Brookland Middle School and McKinley Middle School. And while they are not perfect, it was something that came from the ground up. But what I realized in that work is that we have a really super complex education system in the district. And I always felt like I was very good at helping people understand how that worked. Like, okay, you're going to do this step, and then you're going to do that step. And if you're looking for a school for your daughter, what are the interests that you have as a parent? Do you want dual language? Do you want this kind of program? And I knew a lot about all of our schools because of just the way in which I had been working in community before. The Office of the Student Advocate is literally the manifestation of making public education more accessible for families. So is it a resource toolkit and support for families to figure out how to navigate public education in the district? And I really loved being able to get that work off the ground with people who were in the community to say, what is it that you actually want this office to do? And that office still exists now in the State Board of Education. And Dan Davis, who is also a Ward 5 resident, was my deputy, and he leads that work now. And I'm also really honored to see him lead in such a great way because he had something so powerful to do. He was coming from Sasha Bruce when he came over, and we worked together. And I think that background continues to serve him well and serving families. But the work that probably was the most meaningful to me,
What's the other office though, Faith? For you
Thrive by 5 DC, which is what I'm getting ready to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, my daughter Emerson is 6, and every time I tell a story, I feel like I'm sorry. It makes me feel so emotional. But I almost died with her in childbirth. And I remember vividly having a conversation with Drew when I realized that I was clearly in distress. And I was telling him, I was like, if you have to make a choice, choose her.
Yeah.
And my mom was in the room too, because she's been there when I birthed both of my children. And my mom was like, listen, I don't know this baby. You know, I think I love her, but, you know, I know you, and there's just a lot going on. And that was right here in the District of Columbia. And there was nothing about the doctor that I had that was going to save me. There was nothing about the fact that my husband is an attorney and that we own our own home and that we've done all the things that people say you need to do in order to be safe. None of that was going to save me, but it was another Black woman who saved me for sure, and made sure that I made it through. But in 2019, when the mayor asked me if I wanted to take on this role, Mayor Muriel Bowser asked me if I wanted to take on the role of Thrive by 5, I was like, sure. And, you know, it was work that I hadn't done before. I had never worked in the maternal health space. I had not worked in the early learning space, although it is a really important space. Like Drew and I would have never been able to go to work if we didn't have childcare. Our kids went to Petite Scholar. Shout out to LaShada Ham Campbell.
LaShada, man. Oh, my God.
A native Washingtonian, one of the greatest women
greatest,
of
man.
all time.
Listen, oh my God.
I love her. But I would not have been able to go to work if it wasn't for Petite Scholars, and also for her commitment to fully seeing me as a person who didn't know what the heck I was doing with my child, and also helping me. But when I got into that space, for Thrive by 5, it was a healing opportunity for me. I realized that for sure, I needed therapy after that experience with my daughter, because the thing that was the hardest for me when I really sat with it was that I almost died in a birthing experience that should have been beautiful, with my mom in the room and birthing a daughter who will one day have her own children. That is a kind of generational trauma that I still find it hard to sit in. But I felt like the work of Thrive by 5 allowed me to really heal. There were some phenomenal women that I met in that experience. Some Ebony Marcel, who is a doula at Community of Hope. Aza, who leads the work of Mama Toto Village. LaQuandra Nesbitt, who was the director of DC Health at the time. There were some really, really kick-ass women who were doing some phenomenal work in the space around Black birthing and creating a greater Black birthing experience that I felt so just sad that I had never encountered them in my own birthing experience. Because quite honestly, because they were wanting to do work to make sure that all women had this kind of access, they were looking at Black women where I may have not fallen into that category of Black women that they were looking at, but I was just as much at risk as those women. And so I was really determined in that work in Thrive by Five that while we will be talking about maternal health, I wanted to be clear that this was about Black maternal health, and that if we focused on Black maternal health, everybody's outcomes will be better. And that we should also make sure that we're not just looking at, are you on some kind of social service, and so we need to give you more because you could die in childbirth. No, that could be anyone across the spectrum. And that even women who could have all the degrees in the world understood that they needed to see themselves in another woman who might not have the same things that they had. That work was probably the most convicting for me and the most meaningful, and allowed me to see that the work that I had been doing in public education, K through 12, we have really been missing the mark in a lot of ways in the city, because you really need to focus on this early space. If parents, this is how I actually, and this is probably why Silas was probably like, stop calling me Faith, because I was calling Silas all the time about stuff with gun violence, because it started really hitting me even harder that how can kids thrive by five if they have gun violence in their community? Right. How can they thrive by five if their parents aren't connected to meaningful employment? How can they thrive by five if, their parents don't have the kind of economic opportunities that they deserve? And so it made me really want to explore intersections that hit this space. Like, what about housing? What about gun violence? What about workforce? And not just the things that we keep telling people that they should do, right? Because we already have programs that are designed for that. But how could we think outside the box about other programs that could be even better for people? It made me want to work even more in partnership with people, because yes, this is Thrive by 5 DC, and it sits in the administration of Muriel Bowser, but how can I make this more accessible to other people for them to be a part of the work? And the Thrive by 5 Coordinating Council allowed me to do that. There were people who were named on that committee or that coordinating council, but I also opened the table up to other people, because I felt like I can't create this work without this person at the table or that person at the table. And it was just the most meaningful work to me. It gives me chills just to think about it now, what we in this group of folks were able to create together.
I can only imagine your experience of childbirth. Like you said, it's supposed to be a beautiful thing, and you're like really arrested by, the fight for your life, right? Mm-hmm. And I think about when you tell that story, how many other mothers have gone through that. But then I think about, man, the exhaustion from that depletes you from making decisions for your child from 0 to 5, right?
Yeah, it does.
So how, in your work, how were you able to assist in the empowerment of those moms beyond that point, right? Yeah. They come out of birthing a child, now they got to regroup and really start making these decisions around daycare, decisions around K3, decisions around K5. How do you get them to get up to speed and have the options in front of them to be able to make?
Yeah. So I am committed to one particular thing that sometimes not everyone can understand, but I never use the word empower.
Okay.
I just don't. I think people are powerful. You just get kind of knocked down sometimes, and you get beat up, and you forget that you are powerful. And I am always committed to helping people remember their power, and to see it for the true value that it is. And I felt that way in education. Like, I don't need to tell somebody about parenting. I believe most parents want to be really good parents, but they just need to know, like, well, what do you think is a good parent? What kind of supports do you need in order to be the parent that you want to be? And I feel the same way, too, about moms who are families, because I also think about the trauma my husband dealt with me telling him how I was feeling and the choice he was going to have to make. Because before we had our daughter, we also lost a pregnancy. And I realized that was really hard on Drew in ways that I couldn't even articulate because I was so busy thinking about how it made me feel. I didn't have time to tap into how it made him feel until later when he shared it with me. So I think in this, I realized that I didn't have to do that kind of work alone. And that's why I shouted out some of the women that I mentioned before, because they actually had a lot of the tools and strategies to do it. There were also a lot of other really great community-based organizations, both family collaboratives, other organizations that never really get any shine, that were doing a lot of this work with people in the trenches. And I wanted to learn more about their work, because if I encounter a mom who is dealing with certain things, like sure, there's certain stuff that DHS can do, or DC Health can do, or maybe the Department of Behavioral Health. But what about these other folks who are really close to the problem? The group of individuals who I found actually the most helpful to think through this was high school students. There were a group of high school students at Friendship Tech in Ward 8. And they were doing a maternal health project with their teacher, Miss McLaren. And she now works on their online program, but she was doing it. And a lot of them had thoughts around maternal health based on the things that they watched their own mothers and families go through. And I was loving it. For Principal Booth was like, how many times are you going to keep coming back over here? I was like, well, they have all these great ideas. I really want to make sure that their great ideas, get to these other places, because they had some phenomenal ideas. So I think it's just going, when you realize that someone's been knocked down in that way, who are the bright lights within their own community who can help them remember the bright light that they have within them and the power that they have within them. And a lot of times it's other young people, it's these other community-based organizations. And so I worked a lot with those folks because I felt like they could really help me the most, like connect people into those resources. The other thing that I realized is that it was just a lot of red tape and a lot of things that were overlapping and duplications, that sometimes because people were so busy trying to create something to support a family, they didn't think about something else that may already exist that's creating, and how if we bring those two resources together, it could actually be more impactful. I saw myself as like, since I was able to learn about all these different things, how could I help connect other people together to be more impactful in their work too? And so that's where I really saw my greatest value. My value was not to be necessarily the person to go to someone and say, hey, let me help you with this. But hey, do you know this person? They're actually right here in your community. Or if I heard somebody else share a story, like connecting peer to peer was the way in which I found that a lot of moms and families, dads, aunties, uncles, play cousins, all the people who are all impacted by these things could feel healed and powerful again.
It's wild. I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about, well, first of all, I think the backdrop, for the viewers, is that DC, and particularly, Ward 7 and 8 has some of the highest infant mortality. And 5, right? Some of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. And when you look at it, you talking about, and those same families are dealing with gun violence and food insecurity and opioid addiction or drug addiction in general, and overdose. And I'm just, when I'm listening to you and how you framed out like some of the having an understanding of like these different moving pieces, right? And that's one of the things I've shared this with you before, that I value your ability to not just stop at, whatever the particular issue it might be before you at the time, but just like understanding, like, right, some of these families are dealing with all of this at one time. Yeah. And so a knowledge around one thing can help sometimes, I think, find out, certain intricacies about other things and how to help provide supports for it. But with that being said, for you and the roles you had after that, and then currently your role at PAVE, right? That particular, I think, talent that you have in doing that. What do you do to, How do you utilize that on a daily basis? That ability to see like the whole floor, like a sports reference. You know what I mean? Where you know somebody, a basketball player who can see the entire floor. I feel like I feel like that's what you do when you do what I just described, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I'm thankful that I'm able to see things that way. And I'm also thankful that there are other people who want to continue to be in conversation and see the whole floor too. I think you are also a person like that. I think that Silas is also a person like that, which is why when, I'm thinking about certain things, I may send a text and I'll be like, I'm sorry for this late text, but this is on my mind right now. I would love to be able to connect and to talk with you. Is that I realize that I may be able to see a problem, or I may identify something that I think is a problem, but that I do need to be in community with other people to really figure out how things should be solved.
Sure.
I just think people who believe that they can do it all themselves, or that they're the smartest person that they know, then they've really missed the point. I am not the smartest person I know. I know a lot of smart people, and I am fortunate that I've had a lot of opportunities to build knowledge and, gain access to different things. But I am smarter and more connected in because of the other people who I'm able to connect to. I love the city so much. I really do. And I don't know if I would have thought when I first got here that I would feel so deeply connected. I joke around all the time with people and say, wish I was a native Washingtonian, but maybe I can keep doing a few more things to at least get me a little closer.
Yeah, that's right. Honorary
to be a little honorary, But I do love this city so much. And the other thing I love is I love Black people. And I want to see Black people thrive. And this is probably what didn't allow me to be as successful as I wanted to be in my council race. But that was something that I said all the time. I think Black people are the foundation of this city. And how can I be happy with the progress that my family is making if another Black person in any part of this city isn't feeling prosperity too? And, when I think about a lot of the challenges that we have ahead of us and also the opportunity, I want to make sure that we're seeing all those interconnections in ways that will make Black people and Black families be able to thrive here in the city. And I just know a lot of people like both you and Silas that are also committed to that. And I think continuing to work on that from multiple different angles is important. But as soon as we don't see ourselves in the challenges that one community is facing, then we've really lost the battle. Like, I may not be immediately impacted by, incarceration right now, but that is something that impacts me, that impacts the future for my children and their peer group, right? Sure. Gun violence for sure. And the challenges that our youth are dealing with, that pains me every single day, because we should not live in a city where, I remember when I first moved to DC, H Street didn't look anything like what it looks like right now. I was just admiring that. Even, I don't care what people say about certain things falling off. Some stuff has come a long way, but other people should be able to value that and have experiences that empower in positive ways. And I just want to be committed to that. And I also feel like I've been really fortunate to work in spaces where I've learned how our city works. I've learned how our government works. I know a lot of people feel like it's broken. It's not broken. We just can't see the full picture. And I want to help them see the full picture to access it in ways that will be beneficial to them. And I just really get a lot of energy from that. I get a lot of energy from other people.
It feels at times like education as a section of the pie, right? Mm-hmm. It feels like education and the people in it are sometimes isolated by their own doing, and then sometimes other sections of the pie isolate them as well. And you have educators who feel like their part is the biggest part and sometimes the only part to edifying a child's life and a family's, I guess, existence in the city. Do you feel that way? Do you see those gaps between, let's just say, education in sports, or education in recreation in general, or education and faith-based initiatives, whatever it may be, right? Do you see that sort of like breach between the relationship between that component of a child's life and everything else?
Between, so let me make sure I'm getting this right. So that education is kind of like this academic lane, which is divorced from other kind of recreational areas, or maybe even the other challenges that they may be dealing with in other aspects of their life. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's almost like, and it's hard to articulate, but it's almost like some people believe if we can just get this kid in school from 9 to 3, everything they need.
Oh yeah, that's right not here. No. I think we're seeing the manifestation of that now, as to we had that focus and we missed out on other areas of importance. So, you know, there was a time when we had these no excuse schools, right? Where if you could just get the child in the building and we give them all the discipline that they need, they'll be fine. But we didn't see that really give the dividends that we thought that it would give, because, I mean, a child has multiple different facets of who makes them who they are. Their community. I was at Thurgood Marshall Academy earlier today, and we were working with some students around testifying before the council in a couple weeks. And I said, well, tell me your name, your ward. And I said, oh, forget that. Tell me what neighborhood you live in and why you want to testify. Most of those kids couldn't even tell me what neighborhood they live in. And I told them, I said,
what you mean by that?
So they could tell me they live in Ward 8, that they could live in Southeast, but they couldn't tell me their neighborhood.
Like Fairlawn or Anacostia.
Oh,
they might know their hood.
So okay. So they,
like official.
Chopper City, but they wouldn't say.
I told them, tell me anything.
Really?
It doesn't even have to be the official. What neighborhood do you believe you live in? You know, and the guy was like, neighborhood. And I said, yeah, like your hood. Where would you say you from?
Oh, yeah.
And no. Because I think, again, the way our kids go to school now, they go to school all over the city. Yeah, they are interfacing with different people. They are having to encounter a lot of different experiences, which sometimes don't let them go as deep in their identity as maybe you did when you were growing up. You walked from your house. You probably knew noise was there. You were going to Brookland. You know, you were clear that you might be in Edgewood and wherever else, but you had a real identity around that. I think our kids definitely have certain identities, but they may not be tied to certain blocks for sure. But I think that is important. So where you're from, even within a city, within a ward, within a community, there's something about that identifies you as who you are. You know, I said, tell me something about your parents. You know, I think a lot of times we aren't pushing our young people to think about things in that way. We are often telling them again that we can give them everything they need within this building, and that we are the people who are going to unlock all that for them. When I was teaching, I learned so much from my students. And I wanted every single day for them to know I was learning certain things from them. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. I was like, well, maybe I don't want to know all that. But I was learning things from them every day. I was discovering new things sometimes. I might open a door and be like, oh, okay, I didn't know y'all were doing that there. Okay. But I was learning something every single day. And I think we are also really fortunate to live in a city where there are a lot of investments being put places, but sometimes people don't realize those investments are for them. I have lived in other cities where libraries were closing. There were no rec centers. There was no summer youth employment program. There was no other community-based organizations that were doing things. And I think we have to help young people see all those things as what brings them value, not just the academics that they learn in the building.
Yeah. I think about like the question the statement you just made, and how some of the things that we do have at our disposal in our community, particularly things that may be aimed at youth, can be seen sometimes being underutilized.
Yeah.
But I think so much of that is about people. Yes, they have eyes, so people can see that building is there. Whether it be a new rec or library or whatever, but it's still going to be driven by the people that are inside that building that make people want to not only enter, but come back, you know? And I think trying to share with young people that not only are these resources around for in these families, not just the young people, their families, this is for you. You are supposed to utilize this stuff if you choose to. There's nothing saying don't come in.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And one day, you could be the person that work in this building or run the building, whatever the case may be. And it's I was in a meeting last week in reference to this great program that people just couldn't, and when we were sharing it with folks that work on the ground, if you will, and they had the same reaction that I had when I heard about the program being underutilized. Like, what? Like, we know that there's a need, but people aren't taking advantage of it. But the gap that I saw was that the people of the community, from the community, whatever, they're not made a part of. And I think that whether it's libraries, rec centers, not so much the rec, but schools, library and schools. Like, I think schools could really benefit from. I know we did tap into the fact that it's not, schools aren't as community based as they once were, because the kids that go there don't necessarily live in their immediate community. But for the ones that do, and even for the ones that don't, we have to make an attempt to connect our schools to the community. I think that's essential.
1,000%. I just literally, before coming here tonight, I was having a conversation about that. I'm on the board of communities and schools of the nation's capital, and we were talking about the schools that are all DCPS schools that are being served by communities and schools, and the case managers and site coordinators who are in the schools. And just like you said, there has to be a certain narrative that is told by a certain person to make it feel accessible. So sometimes I think if you have people who come through programs, we don't do enough to connect that person back to the program to be a part of the narrative of getting people to connect to it. Yep. I think a lot about when you talk about your experience being a roving leader. And there are a lot of things I would love to say about the roving leaders, because I would love to see them be what they used to be. And Thenie is probably going to kill me. But I'm going to talk to her about it.
Shout out to Thenie, man.
Shout out. That's my girl. That is my sister. She is. But that will make people curious about, what is the roving leaders? Or communities and schools has been around in the district for 30 years. Clearly, there are a lot of alum that have come through that program, whether they've gone on to college or whether they've gone into a career. How are we getting them back in the building to talk to other young people who are in their community? Because we either shine the light on certain people who have made it, and we don't give other people the opportunity to share their story about making it in their own way. And so I think that that's really important. I also think, again, people have to, you can create. I was on the library board of trustees for many years, and we talked about like libraries and the investments that were being made in libraries, and that libraries have to be more than books. And libraries are more than books. I don't really check out books from the library, but I go there for community meetings. I might, go there to do other things.
Can I say something real quick though? Sorry, not to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
But to that point, and I appreciate your service on that board. And I'm saying this to the viewer: if you in the District of Columbia, our libraries are like unbelievable. No, like seriously, I have to, like, they're unbelievable. And that MLK joint, bro, sometimes that's like for me and the girls, and just sometimes we just go through there.
That's an outing, yeah, for real.
You can go be on the rooftop.
Yes.
Get a snack downstairs.
It's incredible.
Go down the slide.
Down the slide.
That's what we do, me and Molly, all the time.
Exactly.
It's so much that you can do. And when you think about where that library was, it is now a destination. And many of our neighborhood libraries are destinations too. But I was just saying all that to say that, like, if libraries are more than their books, then that means that the people who are inside working there have to be more than just their individual jobs. They have to go outside. They have to talk with people about the resources. You'd be amazed how many online resources the library has to support young people. Amazed. And even when one of the things that was really important to me when I was on the library board was being able to have young people who had parents or any loved one who was in DC jail, and they could do video visits. Libraries are far more.
Correct. They did it at the Anacostia one.
They do it at a lot of them. We had also worked when I was with the Office of the Student Advocate, we had worked with the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens Affairs, which is so funny because then years later, I was Director of Community Affairs, but we worked then with the Director, Brian Ferguson, around how to continue to have parents or loved ones, even if they were incarcerated across the United States, how could they still be connected with their young people in school? And we worked really hard on a resource around that, but libraries were really a hub for that. So I think that no matter what it is, and this is why I do, again, shout out to Thenie, this is why I love when people have been in other roles, so have worked with young people and then move into roles like the Director of DPR, because then they can think about their job as more than just the job. They think about it more as what would the end user of this resource say, because she also had young children who grew up here and knew what it meant to her kids. And so I think you just think about it very differently.
Yeah. So I want you to take off all the hats that you've worn over your career, and I want to go to a very community-based version of Faith Gibson Hubbard, right? You've alluded to this a couple of times in the conversation. You and I having phone conversations, text messages. There's been times when I was working in the council.
Shout out to Valerie.
Yeah. Shout out to Valerie for sure.
And Molly for letting me, because Molly. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really the boss right there. Okay. That's really the boss.
I would get well, first of all, Tony, I would get alerts about shootings when I was working in the council. And I'm telling you, the alert would come through, and like 3 minutes later, Faith would be calling me. Like, what's going on?
Then I pass it on to Jonathan.
Yeah, between John and I, we both would have talked to Faith within like 10 minutes of the alert coming through. And this is sitting outside of your role, being, an education expert and advocate. This sits outside of, all the other roles that you play. You talk a lot about your love of D.C., and a lot of people move here. A lot of people have an interest in being here for a long time, if not forever. A lot of people want to get involved. A lot of people want to help solve issues. I think you've done an incredible job of learning the landscape and learning how you fit in. Talk a bit about that process of learning how to advocate just in your community for the public safety and responding to crime, and just making sure that all the needs that your community needs, that you're able to really fill that gap for those who can't always speak for themselves.
Yeah. What would I say about that? I think that if somewhere is your community and your home, and you're hearing pain from other people, and if they're not willing to, or they don't know how to get information, and you have an access point to get that information across, it's your responsibility to do that. Yeah. I just see that as a responsibility to do that. And I hear a lot of people frustrated, and I wouldn't even call it, it's really frustration. Some people would say it's complaints, but it's just frustration about why do we have to deal with certain things. And again, I think that like in the opportunities that I've had, I've been able to understand how the city works. And I've also been able to meet a lot of different people and foster relationships with different people. And if I can ask the question about what's going on here and what can I do, then I'm definitely going to do that. I mean, and clearly, that I'm going to do that. I'm like, well, Kenya might not respond to this right now, but I'm going to text Silas. And I also felt like just you and Jonathan, and also you, Tony, you all know. I mean, you and Cody, I want to give a shout out to Cody.
Yes,
when
Cody, man.
I met Cody so randomly, but he also gets the messages too.
You know what? I'm reminded of that because you hosted us at your home.
Something at my home, and I had never met Cody before, but he came to the house because Cure was just getting off the ground at that time. And he was with NARC and came to my home. And after that, he was like, hey, you can hit me up anytime. I was like, oh, okay, bet.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you up.
Take you up on that.
I was like, you just don't know how I'm going to take you up on that. And years later, he was telling someone, he was like, so, if something happened, Faith's going to text me. Yeah, I just feel like it is your responsibility to do that. Also, I think when people are in those roles, like the roles that you've been in or that Jonathan is in now, or either Cody, sometimes you want to know that other people are also paying attention and thinking about how to support you in your work. And the other thing is, I don't want to just ask you about, well, why did that happen? But also, what can I do? Because I do also want to be a part of the, the solution. I think about when, KIPP College Prep has had so much happen in front of their school. But I think about when they had the student stabbed and killed right outside of the school. And my heart was just like broken, not only for the young man who lost his life, but also for the other young man who stabbed him. Like, those are families that are just broken on both sides. And I immediately reached out to Jock Patterson, who leads the community engagement work there. And I was like, hey, what's going on? How can I be helpful? And he was like, Faith, we need somebody. And I said, you know what? I think I have somebody to connect you with. And I connected him with Cody. And this is before Cody had really started the growing up work and all the different stuff. But I was like, he just knows the community. And I think the value of the spaces that I've been in is that I've gotten to go into communities and meet people and understand. And when we need experts are already here. We don't have to go somewhere else to find the expert. I have met so many amazing experts who may not be able to fill out the grant form or the RFP for something, but they are doing work that I want other people to know. So if I hear a gunshot, I definitely want to know what's going on, because somebody is behind that on both sides. Somebody is the person who's being shot, and that is somebody. These people are not, it's not just these people. They are people who live in our community and are, members of our family in this community. And I want to know how I can be a part of making sure that we can heal whatever's going on. And, I just don't want to be the person, like, sure, I can call 911 and, I can get someone to come. But if I know somebody else who already has the relationships and can kind of figure out all that stuff on the ground, I want to go to the source of that. And you are a trusted source in that space. And, people trust you and you have those relationships. And so when I hear that, I'm like, well, I'm going to text Silas. I was like, I'm going to text Silas and see, what's going on. I'm going to text Tony. I sent Tony some messages too, like, hey, can we meet up to talk about something? Because that's how things really get solved, not by and there are a lot of people who are real smart and they've created a lot of great models, and I don't want to knock that. But I do believe that we have a lot of expertise right here, and I just want to be able to tap into that.
But know it. Yeah. I like that. That's what I be talking about. And I appreciate that just in terms of that vantage point, honestly, because I think just this whole interview we've been talking about, like, we would love to see more people who make this place their home and become fellow Washingtonians, right? To really have that level of appreciation for their fellow Washingtonian. I think to me that's all it kind of, it boils down to, like, that right there,
And you just end up meeting people that I think, well, I'm a relationships person. So I think that building relationships with people is just so important, not to ask people for anything, but to build the relationship because it's worth building. And Tony, I wanted to just give a shout out to you and also to Angel for the women's dinner that you hosted at Bronze.
Yeah, sure.
What an amazing experience that was. And I was thinking to myself, I would have probably never been invited to this dinner if I wasn't willing to also put in the work and get to know the people who were in the room.
That's it.
And it also felt so good to, like, be in the room with people who I'm like, oh, I remember when I met this person, or I don't know this person. And there's some people from the dinner that I got connected with. But I think a lot of times people want to be in the room for the celebration dinner, but they don't want to put in any work to get there. And I'm really thankful of the opportunities that I've had to put in the work and the people that have been alongside me in doing the work, or realizing I'm alongside them, for something that's important to get done. And it just makes me feel good. And that is also what I want my children to see. When I was running for the council, my kids knocked on doors with me a lot, and they came to events with me a lot. And my daughter was 4 at the time, and my son was 8. And I realized how much that also helped my children have a deep appreciation for our community, because we would go places and they were like, that's this neighborhood and that's that neighborhood, and this, and we live in Ward 5 and I know the mayor. Do you know this person? Or we would go to the museum and they were like, my son is so proud of his museum gear.
Yeah.
That's right.
We rolled by. He's like, you think I need to get a sweatshirt? I was like, do you have any money?
Yeah, you want to do that.
Do you have any money? Because it is high quality materials, and you need to be prepared for that. But I am proud that my kids can look around our community and see great beauty and value in that. And that time allowed them to be able to do that and made them feel so proud. And I hope that they continue to do the same thing, because I believe even Drew, in his own way, he's also been very ingrained and connected in the community because of the work that he's done. Yeah, right. And I love the fact that that is a part of our family. And that's a part of who we are, our identity as a family, and that our kids are learning that too.
Yeah. Faith, we appreciate you for coming on with us.
Thank you
so much.
And I want to take the personal privilege to thank you, because you talked a lot about your connecting skills and desire, and you've connected me to reading partners, which will become, my life's work. Mm-hmm. So you saying to me, hey, consider this board, really has helped change my life. So I really appreciate that, among the other things, but that's definitely one of the biggest things that you've done as far as connecting me to something that is really a big mission for me. So
and
you playing about that reading part, I'm telling you.
No, he is not. And I remember when I was telling Shakura, another great native
shout out to
Washingtonian.
Yep.
I was like, hey girl, I'm leaving this board. She was like, hey girl, you can't leave if you don't find me some more people.
right.
And I'm not sure, you just immediately came to mind. And I think what's so great about it too is that the way in which you're able to honor your father.
Yeah.
It's powerful, man.
It is so
powerful.
It is so powerful. And I think we just need to see more of that. The other thing that I want us to see more of is that there are a lot of great people, just like you, Silas, and Tony, particularly our Black men in the city, that don't always get that same type of attention when we talk about boards, when we talk about who we want to, put into different spaces. I think when you're a woman, you can immediately think about the other women in your tribe, and probably the same when you're a man. But yeah, you just immediately came to mind. And I've really enjoyed watching you lead in that role, and then also honor your father in the way that you've honored him, and just how hard he worked. Yeah. Even with the challenges that he had to face, and can just turn that into an opportunity for other people to learn. I think it's just really, really great. And Read to Succeed is coming up.
Yep, it's coming up. Yeah, next Thursday. Yeah,
it is, and I will be there to support.
All right.
Since they got me on the host committee.
Yeah.
And I went to a host dinner, and Silas wasn't there.
That's
all right.
But
I'm sure he's doing. He wasn't walking there to the host dinner. But I know that it'll be a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just also want to thank you both just for your support of not only just me as an individual, particularly during my time of my council campaign, because both of you all were so supportive and making sure that I felt the love from our community, but also of our family and of other things that I've been doing. Yeah. I just really appreciate that, because I want to give one story about you, Tony. We were having lunch one day, and is it Republic Cantina?
Yeah.
That's his joint.
Yeah.
Listen, somebody almost had an accident trying to make a U-turn to turn in to tell you just about how phenomenal you are and the work that you are doing. And I've experienced that with you too, Silas. I've been out and people hey man, hey, what's going on? I mean, people really value the voice that you bring to our community, both of you. And I'm really honored to know both of you. And to not just say I know you, but also to be able to call you both friends.
Yeah, we do that work together all the way, and none of those calls you reached out to me about were ever any sort of like sweat off my back. It was like, it's what we got to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So thank you all again for watching another episode of Heart of the City. You guys have been supporting us, and we're going to continue having these conversations. So until next time, take care, be safe. One love.
Heart of the city.
Heart of the City.